Hi everybody, welcome to video number 3 for Reconstruction. I am your host, Mr. Norris.
And Mr. Lawrence.
And we're going to be talking about 3 important amendments today, Reconstruction amendments. You will know these by the time this video is over. Thank you for joining us on our journey today through Reconstruction land. Okay, so let's talk about new constitutional amendments. Mr. Lawrence, help me out. What is an amendment?
Well, an amendment is a change, and what we're talking about amendments for this course is a change to the American federal Constitution. Now, Mr. Norris, do you think it's easy to change the Constitution or make an amendment?
I would guess no, especially because there's only 27 in the history of the Constitution, so it is not. There are 2 parts. One is Congress, and the other part are states. So it is very difficult and time-consuming and laborious to do. And I would even say arduous, too.
Nice SAT.
Thank you. Yes, I've been studying. I'm taking my SAT soon. So let's start off with the 13th Amendment. What do you think this one is, Mr. Lawrence?
Well, I think one of the most important amendments, or if not the most important amendment of this time period, or really of all amendments that have been passed, is the outlawing of slavery. And it was enforced by acts of Congress.
And then right after that, a few years later, we have the 14th Amendment, which established a clear definition of citizenship. And a very important part of this says is the Equal Protection Clause, which in theory at that time would grant equality for all Americans. And we'll see that that is not necessarily true then, but it's a lot closer to being true today.
So eventually we have the 15th Amendment that is passed because of some Southern states trying to get around some of these new amendments and new Reconstruction laws. And this one outlaws voting discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The goal of this was to try and give as many African American males the opportunity to vote.
Gee whiz, I wish there was a way to remember these 3 Reconstruction amendments.
I bet there's a way.
Oh, here we go. Here's how you're going to remember. 13th Amendment, free. 14th Amendment, citizens. 15th Amendment, vote. Free citizens vote. 13th, granted freedom to slaves. 14th Amendment made African American citizens. And the 15th Amendment granted suffrage to African American males. So you are going to remember, free citizens vote. 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 I want you to write down free citizens vote 3 times on the top of your paper right now. Do it. You will not regret it. Write it down right now. So let's talk about some problems faced during Reconstruction. We're going to do a little recap of some earlier videos.
All right, so there were some issues. There were political, there were economic, and there were social issues that had to be dealt with during this time period of Reconstruction. And the first issue is the Lincoln-Johnson plan. So again, just remember from our earlier discussions in this unit, we saw that Lincoln had a plan, unfortunately with his assassination. Johnson steps in, he also has a plan. There are issues with former Confederates, and also once Johnson becomes president, there are issues politically between the president and Congress. So Mr. Norris, tell us again about the response to Lincoln and Johnson's plans.
So radical Republicans were not happy with Lincoln and Johnson's plans. They thought their plans were too lenient, and the radical Republicans really wanted to punish the South and its leaders. So there were much harsher requirements. Gone were that 10% loyalty oath that Lincoln and Johnson advocated or favored.
So now to deal with the issue of former Confederates, specifically high-level Confederates, Southerners were required to take an oath to get back into the Union, which we did talk. Southerners were required to take an oath to get back into the Union, and many high-level Confederates would no longer be allowed to participate in the political process for a while.
Absolutely. And Johnson and Congress, as we talked about in the last video, this results in the impeachment of the president. So lots of political problems. Let's jump over to economic problems.
All right, so 2 major problems. We see destruction of infrastructure within the South because the majority of the actual fighting took place in southern states. The South will be devastated as a result. Cities, towns, farms, bridges, railroads, whatever you can think of will need to be rebuilt. The value of southern farms will also decline. So the response to this is what, Mr. Norris?
Well, the South tries to gain money, and they impose high poll taxes, sales and property taxes, and even luxury taxes on very wealthy individuals. And this helps slow economic growth in the South. Mr. Norris, really quick before we move on, we see this term infrastructure. Hopefully our U.S. history people remember from Global 2 this term infrastructure in India when we were talking about imperialism. What does infrastructure mean?
So it's the basic necessities for a really society to operate within its time. So modern infrastructure today consists of roads, bridges, schools, electrical grids, whatever, internet systems. All of this would be part of infrastructure in our modern era.
So very important stuff that was destroyed during the Civil War down south. Okay, let's go over to primary social problems. We have freed slaves and a person by the name of Jim Crow, and a thing by the name of Jim Crow. Now, freed slaves were an issue because many of them did not have land or any sort of job. So an organization was established called the Freedmen's Bureau, and this would help former slaves find jobs and education. Specifically, education was the biggest success of the Freedmen's Bureau. Many African Americans became educated during this time, and that's very important because when they were slaves, they were legally forbidden from learning to read and write. And at the time the Civil War ended, 90% of African Americans could not read or write. The Freedmen's Bureau helped fix that problem.
Now, for the first time in the course, we're seeing this phrase Jim Crow, which we'll talk a lot about throughout the rest of the course. And Jim Crow sounds like a name of a guy, but it really isn't a real person. Correct, Mr. Norris?
That's true. There was a character named Jim Crow, but not a real person named Jim Crow.
So this was a phrase used to represent what were referred to as Southern reactionary laws that were a reaction to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to prevent African Americans from gaining true equality, specifically in the South.
Basically, these laws are, if we could summarize them in one word, Mr. Lawrence, what are we thinking here?
Discriminatory?
Discriminatory, good. You got another one?
Promoted segregation. I know that's two words.
Promoted segregation. Let's go back to Global 2 again, because I just love making Global 2 connections today. There was some type of discriminatory segregation policy in South Africa.
Oh, the apartheid.
Yeah,
system.
the apartheid system. Everybody write down apartheid right now in your packets. APARTHEID. Sure, why not? We'll go with that.
And then circle it.
All right, that is it for video number 3. Please switch to your video response section and answer the following question. And how many sentences, Mr. Lawrence?
3 sentences or more.
3 or more. How does the 14th Amendment invalidate the Dred Scott decision? If you're having trouble starting this, maybe you could start by talking about what the Dred Scott decision did and what the 14th Amendment did, and then connecting the dots between those two.
And when you finish your 3 sentences or more, we want you to circle your answer.
Ooh, circle your answer. Yeah, lots of circling today. All right, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a good day.